Great, well, let's get started. Thanks to everyone for coming, and welcome to the Institute for Government. We're really pleased to have such a great turnout today, and hopefully this will be a really useful and informative event on how to start a career in public policy. I'm James, I'm one of the interns here, and I just have a couple of housekeeping points that we need to cover before we get going. So firstly, if you hear a fire alarm, it will be a real alarm, so please leave the building via the main exit and assemble on the right-hand side of the square by the statues. The event is being live streamed, so hello to everyone on the live stream, and please bear in mind that we are on the record. And thirdly and finally, we have a Wi-Fi network which you are able to join if you want to surf the internet during the event. And in particular, we're using the hashtag IFG Intern if you want to engage with us on Twitter or tweet anything about what you hear today. So thanks, and I'm going to pass over to Hannah White, who is our Deputy Director, to welcome.
Thank you very much, James. So I'm sorry for the billing that you were going to get Bronwyn, our Director, to introduce today, but unfortunately she can't be here, so you've got me. So welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming, and congratulations for being sensible enough to consider starting your public policy career at a think tank, which, being a little bit biased, I think is obviously an excellent thing to be considering. So I just want to say a very little bit to kick off about why I think think tanks are important and what I think you might gain from starting a career somewhere like IFG. So I don't know where you're working now, whether you're at university or what your experience is, but before I came to IFG, I worked in the House of Commons in Parliament, and a lot of my colleagues here at the IFG worked in government. And the thing about government, the thing about Parliament, is it's very, very busy with the day-to-day. There is not a lot of capacity to step back and think and reflect and to come up with new ideas. And think tanks are a really important part of the ecosystem, the policy ecosystem, because they have the space and the capacity and the people who are able to sort of step back and think and reflect. And that was what I really found when I came here from Parliament. There, my head had been down, I'd been doing the day-to-day, I'd been delivering, I'd been very tactical, and it was a real wonderful experience actually to come here and have the time to stop and to think about what I'd been doing and to reflect. And it wasn't that I didn't want to do it when I was working in Parliament, it was just that I didn't have the capacity and the space to do it. So I think think tanks are a really interesting space in which that can happen. And at the moment, this is even more the case. So particularly in government, the thing that we think about, there is just zero capacity to do anything other than Brexit. All the other things that government might like to be doing in the normal way of things, coming up with new ideas and so on, are being completely squeezed out by Brexit. And so having places like the IFG thinking both about Brexit, hi Emily, our final panellist, and all about all the other things that government ought to be doing at the moment is ever more important. And I think the second thing is that think tanks are a sort of important transmission mechanism. So you've got lots of academics and people thinking, you've got lots of experts who have very specialist knowledge, but what think tanks are good at is coming up with practical, workable ideas, things that policymakers actually might be able to pick up and run with. And that's also a really nice thing about being in a think tank. It's the opportunity to think, well, how would this actually work in practice? And have the engagement with the people who are working in government and doing public policy, that you can understand that and that you can see their perspective and see where they're coming from. So personally, again, I started my career in academia, but I was pretty clear quite quickly, having done a PhD, that I didn't want to be an academic. And that was partly because I just felt too detached from the real world, even though I was in theory doing a PhD that was quite sort of applied. And then the third thing is I think think tanks at the moment are a really important counterweight to the sort of famous phrase one of the Conservative leadership candidates used, that, you know, we've all had enough of experts. Well, actually, you know, he may be our Prime Minister soon, but actually I think one of the important things that we do at the Institute is bring evidence into the debate. And in a world where, you know, people talk about alternative facts and so on, particularly in relation to Brexit, what the Institute's been able to do is bring some actual sort of cold, hard analysis into the debate, which has really helped inform the commentariat, the journalism, but also politicians, and help people understand what the debate is about. Personally, I had that experience recently trying to talk on the radio about why I thought Dominic Raab was wrong to talk about proroguing Parliament, and actually talking about the mechanism, how that would happen and what would have to happen and what the alternatives were and what Parliament might like to do. You know, politicians are quite good at throwing out ideas, but actually people like the IFG can say, well, actually, how would that work in practice, and is that really realistic? Now, having said, you know, think tanks are a great place and you should definitely want to work in think tanks, we're also conscious that we're not getting everything right. And particularly, you know, in terms of us at the IFG, one aspect that we are really thinking about a lot and trying to work on is our diversity. We have a relatively good story to talk about in terms of gender diversity, but in terms of other diversity, we're really conscious that we're not very diverse. We think it's really important to be diverse in order to bring in lots of different ideas and perspectives and be more innovative in our thinking. And we see our internship program as a really important mechanism in order to do that. So that is something that, you know, we're really interested in talking to people like you about and getting you involved in order to do that. We also would like to do more in terms of learning from the experience of other countries. We do this in relation to some of our research projects, but it tends to be relatively ad hoc. But again, internships are a really brilliant way for us to bring in experienced people from other countries, or, you know, just people who have lived in a different government system. And it's really important to emphasise that you don't need to know about UK government in order to come and be an intern here, but you do need to be interested in government as a concept. So those are a couple of things that we're trying to work on which we really would like our internship programme to help us with. But there's also a question, obviously, in your minds about why you would want to start working here. And so why this is a good place to think about starting your career. As I said, working in a think tank provides a unique opportunity, I think, to reflect, to do research, to come up with ideas, but also then to see impact from that, to think actually that those ideas that you're coming up with and spending time on, the research you're spending time on, might actually change things in government. And for me, and for I know a lot of the people who work at the IFG, that's a really important reason to work here. Another good thing about starting with an internship at the IFG is the overview it gives you of the government system in the UK. We're very well sort of engaged with Whitehall, with Parliament, and with the sort of wider public sector. And if you're thinking you might want to work in public policy somewhere, starting somewhere that can give you that sort of overview and contact with a sort of wide scope of the public sector, I think is a really sensible thing to think about. We have a wide range of staff with different experience, so just I think, again, and the others can reflect on whether they agree with this, but people come from lots of different places, and just the conversations you can have as an intern, not necessarily connected with your research, but with all the different people who work here, will give you ideas and thoughts about things you might want to do in the future, and also help you build your network, which is going to be really important. And we offer the opportunity to work on lots of different things and to build skills. Gavin can talk about, he's our sort of lead data and sort of data visualization, amongst many other things, expert. And lots of people who come here haven't particularly worked on quantitative data very much in the past, but by the time they finish working with Gavin, really know a lot about it. And then finally, I just say, you know, the IFG is a really brilliant place to be if you're interested in politics. You have a real ringside seat on what's going on. Since I've been here, I joined in 2014, I've seen 2 elections, 2 referendums, you know, actually sitting with a bunch of really interesting, engaged people watching the outcome of the Conservative leadership election is just a lot of fun. So I would definitely recommend it from that point of view. So obviously a very biased picture, but I just wanted to sort of welcome you all and say that I think, you know, you've made the right choice by being here, and hopefully lots of you at the end of today will think about applying for an internship. Thank you. I'm afraid I have to zoom off, but great to meet you.
Very well. Thanks to Hannah for a great introduction. We're now going to hear from Gavin Freegard, who is our Programme Director and Head of Data and Transparency, and he's going to be talking about what the IFG does and also what a think tank is.
Thank you, James. So yes, I'm Gavin. Hello and welcome. I'm a Programme Director here, which means that I'm part of the senior team, but also I'm responsible for particular areas of work. You might have had a clue from what Hannah said and from what it says up there, what one of those bits of work might be. I hope you're all enjoying the British summertime as much as I am, but have a better umbrella than I did as I ran over from Whitehall earlier. Before I tell you a bit more about the Institute and where we sort of fit into the wider think tank landscape, and indeed answer the question, what is a think tank? I thought it would be helpful just to give you a quick potted biography of how I came to be here, because I've spent my entire career in very different bits of public policy. I'm originally from this place. This is Port Talbot in South Wales. You might have seen us on the news, usually when something's gone badly wrong in the steelworks, or when people are looking to talk to people about why they voted to leave the European Union. I then did a degree in history and politics, and straight out of university I joined a think and do tank, I'll come back to that in a second, called the Media Standards Trust. Now, it'll shock you to learn that the Media Standards Trust worked on media policy. And we did a lot of thinking about press regulation, about the future of the press. Media policy is a very strange area because most of the recommendations you're making are about the press or about broadcasters, and of course they're the ones who communicate all of that with the public, or choose not to if they don't like what it is you're saying. But as well as doing lots of sort of research and putting out lots of reports, we tried to do things as well, hence the think and do tank bit. That involved building websites to help the public hold journalists more accountable, to help news organisations try to navigate their way through the online world. It's funny to think back in 2008, Facebook had only been around for about 2 years, I think, so people were really still getting to grips with what social media actually meant for news. And one of the other big things they did is to do with that gentleman there. Anybody know who that is? George Orwell, very good. So one of the main projects of the Media Standards Trust was running the Orwell Prize for Political Writing. So quite a different range of things to do with public policy, lots of research, trying to build tools for the public and for the press, but also trying to encourage people to think and talk about political ideas and highlighting interesting works of political journalism and political writing through a prize. After that, I then joined the dark side. I went into politics. I worked for the Labour Party on press policy and various other things. For this lady, anybody know who that is? Harriet Harman. So Harriet Harman was at that point the Shadow Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. So Hannah described what it's like to work in Parliament, head down all the time, things happening all the time. You haven't got any space whatsoever to sort of step back and think about anything. So that was sort of looking at public policy from actually having to develop party policy for the Labour Party. In fact, taking part in a lot of cross-party talks on sort of press and media policy with the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives and with government. So quite an odd perspective. But after about a year and a half of that, I was exhausted and completely worn out. And that's when I decided to come to the wonderful Institute for Government. So here at the Institute, I'm now Programme Director for a couple of things. Digital government. Here is the obligatory slide of a robot. Lots of people are getting very excited at the moment about artificial intelligence and robotics and automation and blockchain and various other technologies which sound like they've been made up. And we're actually trying to sort of cut a much more sensible path through what that actually means for government, how it can make the most of it, and how it sort of balances the challenges. But also data. Obligatory slide. If you talk about data, you have to have a screen with ones and zeros on it behind you. Most of what we do is actually much more interesting than that. We have a lot of big data analysis projects which take numbers and try to make sense of what government looks like, what public services look like, and what Parliament looks like, and how they're performing. Emily worked and led our performance tracker project, which does that for public services. Lee will talk shortly about Whitehall Monitor, which is our sort of data viz project on central government. Just to give you a flavour, and I think you might be seeing this chart again fairly shortly, this has been one of our big hits recently. So lots of people in the press were talking about, oh, Theresa May's losing loads of ministers. And they were all scrabbling around for trying to put a number on that. So obviously we decided that we would try and find the numbers. This is showing you how many ministers, prime ministers have lost since 1979. You can see that Blair over about 10 years lost nearly 30. Thatcher, that sort of light blue line, over nearly 11 years, also lost around 25. Let me put Theresa May in. There we are. She's lost 35 in less than 3 years, so you can see that that's actually sort of quite an extraordinary rate, and we were trying to put numbers to that and also trying to communicate it in a visually interesting way. It's been used in loads of places, the Financial Times, the BBC, the Guardian, but I think the one that we're proudest of is this.
There's a graph from the BBC.
A graph on a comedy show. This is
This is a graph of ministerial resignations before Theresa May, and here it is with Theresa May on it.
I love about Ian Hislop's surprise that graphs could be entertaining? Obviously here at the Institute they always are. So, what is the Institute for Government and what do we do? Well, as you can see from this slide, we're currently celebrating our 10th anniversary. Had a big party last week and lots of interesting events. We are the UK's leading think tank working to make government more effective. Now, as we'll see in a moment, we're quite different from a lot of other think tanks in the UK. They tend to focus on particular policy areas. We're much more interested in how you put those policies into practice, how you organise government to actually get stuff done. And we'll talk a lot more about that. It's very important to us that we're independent and impartial. We're not on the left, we're not on the right. We're sort of here to recommend things to government, to opposition, to all political parties. We work with civil servants and with politicians from all sides. And it's really important to our reputation and to actually be able to get things done that we are as impartial and independent as possible. So what is it that we, and I should say as well, our funding, about 85% of our funding comes from a charitable foundation called the Gatsby Foundation, set up by Lord David Sainsbury, who was a science minister in the Blair government and thought the government could work a little bit better and decided to sort of endow an institute to do something about that. So that's how we come to be here. We also take money from other research councils, from other charitable foundations, and also on sort of project-by-project basis from other sponsors. You'll find a lot of think tanks aren't as lucky as we are, and they actually have to sort of pitch for work a lot more, which might affect the work that they do, but we can come on to that later. So what is it that we actually do here at the Institute? Well, we publish lots of research and commentary. If you've thought about think tanks or encountered think tanks, you've probably encountered all of the reports that they do. And to give you a sense of some of the projects and some of the things that we're researching and publishing reports on at the moment, that does of course include Brexit. It will not surprise you to hear. We haven't got a position on Brexit, but what we look at is whether government is prepared and how it's actually approaching all the sort of negotiations and having to legislate to be ready, whatever it is that actually happens at some point in the undefined near or far future. We've also got our big sort of data projects, which try to make sense of what government looks like and how it's performing. We've got a wonderful project called Ministers Reflect, which publishes interviews with people who've served in government. And it turns out they want to be quite honest when they get out, and they've got a lot of interesting things to say. We've got a big project on outsourcing and how government sort of contracts with third parties outside government to deliver public services. We've done loads of things down the years on policy making. I don't know if any of you have heard of sort of nudge and behavioural insights and behavioural economics. That was a lot of that in the UK came from a report we published back in 2009, I think, something like that. And as you've seen, we've also do a lot on sort of digital government at the moment. So loads of things. It's not just about big research reports, which can be quite useful for putting your foot in the door in a particular policy area or giving a long considered view. We're also quite reactive in putting what we think out into the public domain in reaction to things as and when they happen. To take quite an important recent example of that, Hannah was talking about all of these discussions about what happens with Parliament during Brexit. A couple of posts on our website about that have been cited by loads of news outlets, but also Conservative Party leadership contenders about how easy it would be for Parliament to block no deal and things like that. We also held lots of public events. We've got a wonderful event space, I hope you agree. And just to give you a flavour of some of the things that we've done in recent weeks, we've had a keynote speech from the UK Cabinet Secretary, that's the UK's most senior civil servant. We had the senior minister from the Singaporean government talking about how his government approaches things. We've had a number of panel discussions on everything from outsourcing to Brexit. We've even had an event called Data Bites, where we have people doing interesting things with data in government, presenting for 8 minutes. And yes, we do have a timer on the stage to make sure they stick to it. So again, that's to get people into the building, thinking about our issues, talking, networking, and again, another way that we can sort of influence the public debate. We also provide a safe space for discussion and training. Now, that includes quite a few things. So we do lots of private roundtables, which help inform our research. We can make rooms available to people in the civil service and various political parties, so they've got a safe space to be able to talk about long-term issues facing government. And we also do lots of learning and development with politicians and with civil servants as well. Obviously, we can't give many details about that publicly, apart from saying that we do it. But again, it's helping them to prepare for government and what they might want to get done there. So we've used this T word, or these two T words, quite a lot already. What is a think tank? Now, there is no wrong answer to this because it's a slightly weird and wonderful world, as we're about to learn. If I were to say to you, what is a think tank? How would you define it? There's no wrong answer.
An organisation that tries to think in a long-term kind of way about where Britain might go in a policy direction in times to come.
Good answer, probably better than the one I'm about to show you. There's another answer here, I think. Say things similar to that? Yeah. This is the Oxford Dictionary definition, because of course I am that sad and lame and twee. A group of experts who provide advice and ideas on political, social or economic issues. As you've just said in your definition, and as Hannah was sort of saying as well, we're able to take a little bit of a step back, although it has been quite frantic over the last few years with everything that's going on Brexit and in government. But we can take that step back, come up with a longer view, think in a lot more depth about a lot of the big issues facing the country. And as you can see, a lot of that is about politics and government, but also things that government can influence, such as social or economic issues. And there are also some very specialist think tanks working in particular areas like health and education. And again, we'll come to that in a second. If I were to ask you to name another think tank that isn't the Institute for Government, any names spring to mind? Resolution Foundation, yep. Chatham House. Yep.
UK Changing Europe.
Yep. Constitution Unit. You've named loads that aren't on this slide. That's brilliant, actually. So this is a slide, I should say it's adapted from teachertoolkit.co.uk, and I've added a couple of others to it. And it's a very rough, indicative view of sort of which ones are in the centre, which is where we would put ourselves, and ones further on the left and further on the right. So you can see there's quite a lot of diversity in there. You've got sort of us thinking about government, the Institute for Fiscal Studies thinking about fiscal stuff. You've got Reform, who are sort of probably one of the more similar think tanks to what the Institute thinks about. They think about how government works. You've got lots of others that are perhaps more associated with particular political parties, even particular politicians, and they sort of range quite widely in the sort of things that they cover. We've got New Local Government Network, for instance, and Localis, which think about local government. IPPR, Policy Exchange, which cover quite a lot of broad areas. The Work Foundation, which looks at work, surprisingly. So there's quite a sort of variety of what all of these different things do. And we'll all have slightly different approaches. We'll vary in size. We've got about 50 people here at the Institute. That makes us one of the bigger British think tanks. I did once walk into the Urban Institute in Washington, D.C., which is a sort of relatively well-known, but not one of the biggest American think tanks. And they said to us, so how big are you guys? And we said, about 45, 50. We're one of the bigger UK think tanks, you know. And we said, so how big are you? And they said, well, we own 6 floors of this building and there are 650 of us. And that's one of the smaller American think tanks. So it gives you an idea of the scale. And we can talk about international think tanks if that's of interest later. So yes, it's a wide variety of stuff. I mentioned education policy. You've got the Education Policy Institute there. In health, you've got the King's Fund, the Nuffield Trust, the Health Foundation, think tanks for everything. There are also quite a lot of organisations which sort of do a lot of the things that think tanks do. So putting out research reports, holding events, trying to influence the public and political debate. Lots of organisations which sort of do that but aren't necessarily think tanks. So just thinking about the bit that I work in, so digital, government and data, that kind of thing. You've got the Open Data Institute, who do a lot of policy work, but also build a lot of things. You've got Everyone, who think about what technology means for society. You've got Nesta, the National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts, which is huge. They have a few hundred people, and they think a lot and build a lot and go around the world a lot. And also do lots of skills and sort of leadership type training. So it's quite a wide field, and it's actually quite difficult to define exactly what a think tank looks like. Because you've got us, you've got those organisations that are a little bit on the fringe. You can also get public policy jobs in charities, in campaigning groups, and of course there's a lot of public policy to be done in government and in political parties as well. So I think that's a very quick introduction to the field. I'm very happy to take questions. Any questions? I mean, we'll have a panel discussion in a short while as well. I've answered everything about think tanks.
With this many think tanks in the country or more, how do you kind of establish a niche for yourself? And I guess relative to how old this think tank is,
That's a brilliant question. I should say as well, this is a very small sample. I think somebody did a recent study and found there was something like 90 to 100 organisations in the UK that could be seen as a think tank. I think for us, we have a niche, and in a sense that's the slightly reductive answer to your question, which is there are relatively few other organisations on here which think about the issues that we do. So for us, thinking about how government goes about things rather than the finer points of what a welfare policy should look like or what an environment policy should look like, that allows us to carve out a bit of a niche. The IFS, again, that is, and resolution as well, they kind of have the feel to themselves when it comes to immediate reaction to big financial events like the budget. Others, the health and education think tanks obviously have quite a narrow niche as well, but then you've got the really wide ones. So IPPR, that was seen as very influential because of particular politicians that it was close to in the 1990s during the Blair government. That was sort of doing a lot of the thinking for the Labour Party. Demos as well at various points. You then got Policy Exchange, which did something similar for David Cameron, Michael Gove, a lot of people sort of coming into government in 2010. And Bright Blue, for instance, has tried to sort of appeal to that part of the Conservative Party as well. So there are particular areas of interest which might be niche, but the other ways of developing yourselves are to sort of hitch onto particular politicians or to be seen as representative of a particular political point of view. We're saying in Germany they have a slightly different approach to think tanks. They see them as such an integral part of the sort of political thinking system that when you get beyond a certain threshold of votes, you get to set up your own think tank with public money. Obviously that's not something which happens in the UK, but it's interesting that they've sort of formalised the role of think tanks in the political process a little bit more than we have.
Hi, thanks for the talk. You mentioned that IFG, along with almost two of the only sort of unique types of think tanks out there, do that they advise on governments, have to be governments. Why is that?
That's a really good question, to which I don't have a particularly good answer. I think other European countries in particular, I think, have a much longer tradition of having schools of government as part of their universities and thinking much more deeply about how government actually operates. I think we haven't necessarily had that long-standing historical interest in the UK and probably haven't seen government as a science, not that we see it as a science, it's obviously an art as well, but people have tended to focus on party political issues rather than the sort of workings of the state. And that's not a particularly great answer, but I think that's, I'll think a bit more about that.
I was wondering, what is think tank communication relationship with civil society groups or NGOs? So do they work with them or do they take input from them?
It depends very much on the think tank, I think. So there will be some on this list, and obviously we would all see ourselves as NGOs and civil society organisations as well. A lot of think tanks, though not all, are charities. We're a charity, and obviously if you're a charity you have to be politically neutral, you can't be party political. Some of these probably aren't charities for that reason. Some of these will work with other campaigning groups on particular issues. We talk quite a lot to a variety of other groups. Again, thinking about the stuff that I tend to work on, I speak quite a lot to Transparency International, to the Open Data Institute. So it very much depends, I think. And some of these will sort of have more formal relationships on particular projects, but I think, if I'm being honest as well, we probably don't speak to ourselves and see ourselves as a sector as much as we probably should, because a lot of the issues that we face are quite similar in terms of bringing in funding, how we're influencing government, and government not always giving us the information that we need. And yeah, we're not as developed as a think tank sector as we probably could be on that.
Well, thank you, Gavin, for a fantastic and really wide-ranging talk. We will have some time for some more questions in a minute, but for now... we're going to pass over to a series of talks from a range of different people who have done internships at the IFG. And so we're going to hear first from Lee Ratton, who's a current intern, and he's going to be talking about a day in the life of an intern.
Wonderful. Thanks. I'll try and keep it relatively brief so we have more time for the panel discussion. I'm Lee. I'm one of the 5 interns here. We've been here for about 2 months now, I think. And before I get started on what I've been up to, I thought I'd give you a little bit about how I ended up at the IFG. So I'm 22. I'm the youngest member of staff in the building at the moment, which is terrifying. That's fine. I was born in Barbados, but I spent most of my childhood in South London, and I graduated last year from York in social and political sciences. So this is my first proper job out of uni, as opposed to James, who's 28, has done his PhD. So there's a whole range of diverse range of experiences when it comes to the interns here. And yeah, that's how I got started. What I'm working on at the moment is two things. So I'm part of Whitehall Monitor, which is a team that looks at the shape, size and performance of Whitehall, and we produce this 170-page report once a year. It's coming out in January, so it's quite early stages of the report at the moment. So it's been really great for me to be part of the initial scoping process, because I've had a real role in shaping what the project's going to look like. Freddie, who's working on Performance Tracker, they're quite a lot closer to publication date. He's managing a whole chapter on GP services, and so what you can see is at the IFG you can do a whole range of work on projects, all the way from the initial scoping all the way through to writing. And you get that experience at lots of think tanks, especially the smaller ones where there are fewer people around. A friend of mine at Demos has written 2 reports, and they're there for about 12 months. So there's a lot of work that you can get into, and you can have a disproportionate effect probably, an impact in the think tank sector. This is one of the charts from Whitehall Monitor. We have a series of explainers on our website that are linked to our reports. This was literally updated by me this morning. It shows freedom of information requests granted in full. As we can see, the Brexit departments are quite untransparent, as you'd expect. So you can see the range of sort of work that we're doing. Whitehall Monitor is a data-driven project, so there's a lot of charts. I didn't have any experience of that coming into it, and I now make charts on a daily basis, and it's nothing to be scared of. So that's been really great. The other project that I work on is Team Ministers, which is our project on the IFG's political people. So all of the stuff around Ministers Reflect that Gavin was talking about, stuff on our ministers database. We have the most comprehensive database of ministers, better than the government probably, and other people on payroll. So there's a whole range of work that we do, but Team Ministers also leads on reactive work around leadership elections and elections and those sorts of things. So I've been doing a lot of work around that. This chart I update, but also work around the leadership contest. So this is ready for 6 PM today when the next person gets eliminated. And I've written 2 leadership explainers, one on the Conservative leadership election and one on the Lib Dem leadership election. And they've had thousands of views, so it's being seen by lots of people, which is great to get your name out, but also it's great because you're having that impact on the debate and the discussion and helping educate people, which is really valuable. If any of you are thinking of doing anything more than being at the IFG, we've just released this report, Becoming Prime Minister. Everything you need to know from meeting the Queen onwards, so you've got to do the legwork on the first bit. What else we do as interns? We help out with the events, so all those great events that Gavin mentioned, we were all in the room, and it's a really good opportunity to hear some really amazing speakers. We also do a lot of reactive work, so stuff like covering the Peterborough by-election. This is my chart, but James did work on the local election. He's part of the devolution team, and David, who is not here, is part of the Brexit team, has been doing work on the European elections. So there's a whole range of things for interns to get involved in. 2 other things that we do. Journal summaries. We take it in turns to summarise all these journals. And also we do a lot of tweeting. And the reason why I flag these 2 things at the end is because we think that they're really useful things that you can do when you're preparing for your applications. Not necessarily writing summaries of the journals, but getting out and making sure you're reading a wide range of those sorts of journals. So you get that breadth and depth of opinion and ideas. We're all on Twitter. All our handles are floating around. It's a really good way of interacting with people in the public policy space. You end up finding loads of interesting and entertaining things, and it's a good way of getting a handle on whatever think tank you're applying for, what work they're doing, what reports are coming out, what might come up in the interview, who knows. So I flagged those two now. I won't take any questions now, but feel free to throw things my way after these two lovely people have spoken. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. Right, so my name's Sarah. Just to start off, a little bit of background about myself. I joined the Institute in October last year as an intern, and at the end of my internship, I was hired to stay on as a researcher. Since I joined the Institute, I've been working on the outsourcing project that Gavin mentioned. Before I joined the Institute, as you might have detected from my accent, I am that international diversity that Hannah referred to. I come from Australia, and I spent a few years working in the Australian Civil Service in the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet, which is basically an amalgam of Number 10 Downing Street and the Cabinet Office. When I joined the Institute, when I applied for the internship, I'm pretty sure the only British minister I could name was Theresa May. So if you're not an expert on British politics, don't let that put you off applying if you do have the genuine interest in learning. I would also say, having come from government, that I totally agree with what Hannah mentioned about this being a wonderful place to kind of take a step back and reflect on government and let big ideas percolate through your mind in a way that you just don't get a chance to when you're doing a lot more reactive work, which you might often find you do in government. Anyway, so I have been asked to talk about what a researcher does. If you come, if you're relatively fresh from university, you might have an idea in your mind of, some boffins sitting in a room, reading journal articles and trawling through data and writing reports. And part of that is true, but it is a much broader job than that. I like to explain the researcher job in that there are two ways of thinking about it. There's two main parts of the job. One is that kind of more traditional research that you might have in your mind, and in the IFG context, that's about thinking about what steps government could take to be more effective. And then the other half of the job is about convincing the people who have the power to implement those changes that they should do so. So, the first part of that, I should actually, before I proceed, I should probably say that obviously what a researcher does pertains to my experience at IFG. I suspect it's broadly similar at most other think tanks, though I suspect a lot of other think tanks, your job as a researcher might be more focused on funding, which we are very fortunate here that the majority of our funding is sort of guaranteed, and we don't need to be approaching funders on a regular basis, though it does form a small part of what we do. Anyway, the first part of the job that I mentioned before, much as you might expect, it's interviewing people, trawling through data, reading government reports, all that kind of thing. I should also mention that researchers play a really important part in generating ideas for new strands of work and in fleshing out what those strands might be. And that it probably is one minor point of difference between what's expected of an intern versus what's expected of a researcher, though I think one really great thing about this place is you are totally given you're given an opportunity commensurate with your enthusiasm and ability. So even if you are a really fresh intern, if you have a great idea, people will absolutely listen to you and, if it is a good idea, help you get it off the ground. To come to the second part of the job, the influencing impact part that both Hannah and Gavin kind of touched on, I guess that's less obvious if you've come from a university context, but it is really important because, you might write the most insightful, interesting report, but, if it's just sitting on the shelf gathering dust and no one reads it and acts on it, that's obviously not the outcome you want. So to flesh out the influencing side of things a little more, it's really about looking for opportunities to promote our research findings and to add value to debate and encourage government to act, and working to establish ourselves in the Institute as an expert voice on the topic at hand. To make this a little bit more concrete, we do, as Gavin mentioned, keep a close eye on the media, the news, and Twitter, which is one of my favourite things. never thought I would get paid to tweet and refresh Twitter throughout the day. But here we are. It's all about looking for opportunities where people are more likely to pay attention to your work and what you have to say about a topic, and where you can shed light on a complex issue like Hannah mentioned with prorogation of Parliament in the Brexit context. Then the next part of that is when I talk about publicising your work, that's not just the reports you write. The work I'm talking about is the insights and the findings from reports. And how you package that. Yes, sometimes is in reports, but it's also through Twitter threads, comment pieces for our website, writing for external publications. Sometimes it's giving quotes to journalists, giving evidence to parliamentary committees. A lot of our researchers, if you watch the BBC News channels, you'll see a lot of our researchers pop up on there all the time. Thankfully, not me, but certainly... Yes. But certainly, plenty of my colleagues you will see on TV giving, shedding light on topics in ways that journalists and other people in the political sphere might not be in a position to. And then the other part, the other aspect of influencing that takes up a lot of researchers' time is, I really hate this word, but I couldn't find a better one to kind of encapsulate it all, and that would be networking, which if you're someone that is not naturally not naturally enthusiastic about networking, I would say it's not a scary thing. It's really about identifying and connecting with the experts in your field of research so that you have access to their expertise, and hopefully they'll listen to you when you have recommendations or insights to share. So this is things like going to conferences, attending roundtables at other think tanks, going to events, and also, as Gavin mentioned, participating and helping to organise our own events. So, for example, I mentioned I'm working on outsourcing. We're releasing a report over the summer, and in the lead up to that, to, I guess, build momentum and help establish the Institute and ourselves as expert voices on the topic, we've been scheduling a series of events where we bring in experts to discuss, topical issues around outsourcing. The only other thing that I will mention about what a researcher does, specifically at the IFG, and I am really surprised this hasn't come up already, but it's lunch. So one of my favourite things, about working here is the IFG puts on free lunch for staff every day, and it's this wonderful arrangement where there's two big communal tables, and you go down between 12:30 and 1:30, and you just sit next to whoever has a spare space next to them, whether it's Bronwyn, who's the director, or another intern, or any member of staff. And it's one of my favourite things about this place, because you have the most interesting conversations, from the banal to the deeply insightful, and the people working here are great fun people, but they've also done really interesting things. And as someone that's new to this country, it has been a great way to learn about, British government and what opportunities there are out there and the interesting things people have done. Anyway, that's it for me for now. I hope that's shed some light on what a researcher does, specifically at IFG and maybe more broadly in the think tank world. Look forward to taking your questions in the question and answer session, and if you'd prefer not to ask a question in front of me, please, in front of everyone, please come up to me at the drinks event afterwards. I'd be very happy to chat. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily. I've been asked to speak about life after IFG internships because I have indeed left. I left 4 months ago, but having been here for 4.5 years. So it's not quite the kind of intern to out in the world experience that many of our interns have. So I came here as an intern in 2014, and then, like Sarah, was hired as a researcher, and then actually my experience, I was then promoted twice. I was senior researcher and then associate director, and then I thought, my goodness me, I should probably actually try working somewhere else, because this is a lovely cocoon that you could stay in forever if you're not careful. So that just speaks to something that this is a place that I think really unusually really develops its people, and there is real opportunity here to kind of get promoted and move up in your career, and I've now been in a position to move into a really interesting role somewhere else, and I've only been working in this field for 4 years, which is pretty great. But I just thought I would. Has anyone listed the other places that other interns have gone to? I just came up with some that from the ones that I've known. I don't know if anyone's going to do that. So obviously, so some interns, they do their 6 months, and that happens to coincide with a recruitment round for researchers, which means that they can apply to be researchers, and some are successful and some aren't, depending on the field. But they go off and do loads of other interesting things. So the obvious place people go is into government. You're just better at writing those applications and giving those interviews when you've been here, because you've learned everything about government. So loads of people go into the fast stream, got loads of people going to the Treasury fast stream, and the general fast stream, but also into policy advisor roles, and actually people in those roles find they get promoted quite quickly, because again they've got that inside edge, or into private office. Which is a role where for people who kind of like the relationship management-y bit more than they like the head-down research bit. So people have done that. People have gone into local government, which actually is probably a slightly better place to be at the moment because nothing's happening in Whitehall. That's not true, but I'm just always flying the flag for local gov. People go into other policy research roles in other charities. So we've got a colleague who has now gone into Mind in their policy and research team, former intern, and others, like that's quite a common route that people kind of take these policy research experiences and take them to other charities and think tanks, and again you're very hireable at that point, and people go and work in politics. So I didn't do any of that. I stayed here because it's lovely, but I didn't, before I came I didn't know anything about government much, my path here was that I was also a bit older when I came here and interned. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I would say that if you're someone, and I imagine actually probably the people who are here are the keynotes who kind of know already the stuff, but if you're feeling a bit like your knowledge isn't quite, there's so much to know and I need to know everything, I wouldn't sit down and cram a textbook of British politics. I think that the most useful thing to do is to know what this organisation is interested in. You come here, that's one way to do it, but all organisations are narcissistic, right? You come into interview, and I've interviewed tons of interns when I was working here. You come to interview and you want to hear about the other person, but you want to hear them tell you about you, and and show that you understand what the organisation cares about and is interested in, and then ideally says what your skills and passions are and how they line up to that. And I think particularly this place, there's so many avenues to know what's going on here. So you can read the reports, but actually, and it's good to know what some of the reports are, particularly if they're in an area that you're already interested or working in, be it Brexit or public services or devolution or any of those things. But actually, I would say reading the blogs and the comment pieces, probably a better way of doing that, because that's the way of getting kind of what's live, what are people in the building right now, what do they care about, and they're also talking on Twitter all the time. I mean, in my new job, it's amazing. I'm released from Twitter. I just never go on it anymore. But it is people in this building really use Twitter, and they're talking on it. They're giving their opinions all the time. So you want to know what people here care about? Just look at, they're saying it in public every day, and conversations from inside the office spill out of the office onto Twitter. So it's a really kind of good way. Sometimes to the better, sometimes to the worse, when we're just mocking people on Twitter. So that's one thing I wanted to say. So I came here as a career changer. So I'd done Teach First. It was the first thing I did back in the old days of Teach First. I don't know, when it was just quite new. I'm under Labour government, so that was in 2007. And then one of my old academics from my undergrad said, "Oh, would you like some money to study?" And I was like, you know what, that sounds nicer than this. That sounds easier. I'll go and do that. Anyway, so I did that, and I did a PhD, and I finished my PhD, and it was not in government. It was in dementia in 19th century Britain, history of medicine. Nothing to do with this. But there's a connection now with my new job at the Centre for Ageing Better, so kind of come full circle. Finished PhD, like Hannah, was like, no, done with academia. And, career changing is going to be a factor of everyone's lives. It's really important. None of us are going to do one career for the whole of our life, do one thing, train, work, retire, that kind of tripartite way of life just isn't going to be the reality for people around our age-ish. I'm probably the oldest person here, but Gavin's older than me by a couple of months. But I might not be, actually. And I think the internship here, if you're career changing, if we do have any career changes in the room, is a really good one, because you, and I mean, I'm sure Sarah can speak to this as well, you know, he was doing a bit of a change, is that here you do real work. And if you can do things, you know, if you can write well, and that's something that this place really, really, you know, is big on. If you can write well, if you can contribute to meetings, if you can come up with ideas, no one's going to say, no, 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 don't do that, you're the intern. Absolutely not. That would never happen. So if you can do stuff and bring those capabilities into the job, the IFG is a really good place to do that. And if, you know, you will get to do what you can do, which is really great. So that's just a reason to do it. And yeah, so I guess the only other thing I'd say, I'm not talking about my life after IFG internship. If anyone wants to know about the Centre for Aging Better, you can ask me, but I haven't been there for that long. But it's actually, Gavin didn't mention what work centres, I think, on his list. So those are other organisations for people who are interested in this kind of thing. So Aging Better is a what work centre, which are organisations that try and build the evidence base in particular areas around what works to support evidence-based policy making in government. We're not mostly funded by government, some of them are. We're funded by the big lottery. And so that's also a place which is, you know, we write reports, but also we kind of develop and deliver services in order to test them. So kind of get a bit more, if you're into that kind of like a bit more hands-on, like on the ground type stuff, then a what work centre is a really good place to go. That's one of the reasons that I went to get a bit more of that kind of experience kind of in my pocket. So I would just say that. Anyway, the final thing is that being the expert, that's what you do in this job. Be the expert. Do I need to finish? Can I say my last thing?
Yeah,
Being the expert, we do in this job, and it's super fun, and I'll end there. Thank you.
Very cool. Well, thanks, Emily and Sarah, so much for really wide-ranging and fascinating talks. We do have time for a short panel discussion now, so we will open the floor to questions.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily an advantage or disadvantage. I think we're probably, I suspect, probably looking for a wide range of disciplines. I don't know, maybe Akash, you want to come in at this point, do you?
Yeah.
No?
Well, I'm up next to talk about
Okay, all right.
But, yeah, I mean, you guys could, you can talk about what you
yeah. I look
beforehand, and
yeah.
we do take people from all disciplines, and we don't give any sort of priority to people from particular academic backgrounds.
And also you'll learn. I didn't have an economic background, and here I learned so much about economics, and I was running essentially an economic derived project by the time I left. And you know, working with colleagues, working with Gemma Tetley, who's our chief economist, this is really a place where it's like, we don't worry about, but can you learn? Can you learn, and can you learn quickly? Yeah. And that's the key.
On the economics thing, this is slightly a little bit off topic, but I did law and politics at university, and then while I was working in government, I did some first year economics part-time, and it was, for government, it was like one of the best decisions I could have made. So if anyone is thinking about, you know, going into government or public policy more broadly, I would highly recommend. It's not going to be a disadvantage if you haven't done it on an application, but I think as a long-term investment in your own capability, I couldn't recommend highly enough, even if you've never done any economics, just doing some basic macro and micro.
And just to give you a sense of the spread as well, we've got people here who did study economics, we've got those who did history, who did politics, who did law, who did English, who did geography. We had somebody who started a PhD in microbiology. We've got all sorts of different backgrounds.
How many have got disabilities?
I haven't got that number to hand. We do have, there are a number of people who would.
Listening to all your roots, all your roots and everything. I mean, I do a bit of reading and studying up myself. I mean, if you, in terms of like social mobility, social equality stagnant, which is a good place to start. I mean, then throw disabilities, non-visible and visible. And another good, interesting sort of statistic, if you have, I think, you're deaf or partially hearing, you do better than someone with epilepsy, or someone in the wheelchair as well. I mean, throw that into the works as well. I mean, then geographical placement as well as. I mean, ooh, interesting. I just thought I'd throw it in there.
I mean, as Hannah was saying, I think the reason that we're doing events like this is to try to, we know that we could be a lot more diverse. I think we do have some sort of invisible disability. We've got people from all corners of the UK, very different social backgrounds. We know we can be better at it. That's why we're doing things like this.
Hi, can you just take me through how you might start out when you're creating a project? So let's say, for example, the outsourcing project, if that's the correct word. How did that begin, and what might you be doing as an intern within that? Thanks.
Well, seeing as I'm working on outsourcing, I'll take that. So the background to that, the Institute had done some work, I think back around 2012, on public service markets, and had produced a couple of different reports and come up with a bit of a framework of, like, I think it's like 10 or 12 questions that you should ask yourself if you're preparing to making a decision to outsource a service. And then at the start of 2018, Carillion collapsed. So for those who don't know, Carillion was a major outsourcing firm. And at that point, and this is all before I joined the Institute, and at that point, a decision was made of, it's time to revisit this line of work. There have been a lot of developments in the outsourcing space, in government, since 2012. Let's pick up this work again, look at how things have changed, look at where we can bring new insights, look at where there's an opportunity there's an opportunity to build on momentum for change and to identify what that change should be. So a decision was made to pick that up again. I should also say outsourcing falls in a broader context of work on the relationship between the public sector and the private sector. So that's just one. We'll be doing some more thinking around that. So I guess the decision was made because there was seen to be a need through current events. It was seen that there would be, government would be receptive to those messages because there was this need created around some of the problems in the supplier market for outsourcing, and because we were already working off a base of expertise that we could pick up and develop on. Does that answer your question? And sorry, about the other thing was about what interns might do.
Process, so that when a decision is made, what's the process for actually coming up and creating an ultimate report?
Okay. Oh, okay, so about how you go from having the idea. So I guess broadly speaking, you work as a team to plan out what questions you want to look at the report, what resources you might want to draw on. You go out and you do the research and start writing up the report. And I think interns are involved in like all those kind of steps, fleshing out the scope of the report, doing the research, doing the interviews, going to events and speaking to people and identifying who you might want to talk to, and doing writing and producing charts, for the report. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Just on project generation, very quickly, to give another example, the Future Technology and Government project that I'm leading at the moment, that you had the robot slide on, that came from not only us having a background and having done lots about digital government, but one of our interns, now a researcher, was having a conversation over lunch with our director, and he'd done a master's in AI and started talking about it and basically pitched a project that we're now doing.
Hi there. This might be an easier question or a hard question, depending on how you want to answer it. But as an intern, what was the hardest task or project or thing that you've done?
I mean, I think I have one. So I was also the Whitehall Monitor intern. There's always one, right? One will be chosen to be the Whitehall Monitor intern. And someone, I bet I had done some I knew what Excel was. But I was handed a database in Access. I was handed a database in Access, and it was like, someone needs to fix this. And I was just like, you kidding? And I was kind of like, do they know? Like, did they switch my CV with someone? That's a very like, but it is. I mean, that's an extreme example because mostly you're not doing something that's like technically you have no idea what to do. Most of the things you're doing, you could, even if you've not done it before, you could use some common sense. But it's very much that kind of like, okay, do it. So it's like, okay. First principles, what do I need to do? I know probably someone in this building knows how to use Access, and I need to find them and get them to teach me how to do it. So then there was a bit of that, looking at stuff on YouTube. So I guess, that is the extreme example, but it is, again, like an example of how, like, you will be asked to do things you've probably never done before. But that's really good. And now I've forgotten how to use Access, but I'm really good at Excel now, so.
Yeah, the database is now fixed, I'm sure you're glad to hear. It's working perfectly. I'm glad I'm not responsible for that. So, yeah, I think with any new job you start, there's always stuff that you haven't done before. I think at the IFG there's probably, especially on data-driven projects, there's probably more of that than you might get elsewhere. But there's great data training, everyone's incredibly supportive. It's a very flat sort of hierarchy, if that makes any sense. So I feel like the work you are being given is challenging, and that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing, but there is enough support here and hopefully there's enough support at other think tanks as well, to make it broader for a second, that you can rise to those challenges, I think. I don't know, James, what's been challenging for you?
Oh, what's been challenging for me? I mean, I think part of doing an internship is you get to learn lots of new skills, and you get to learn how to do things differently. And so I was coming from a background where I, spent like a year just kind of writing and shut away in my room writing a thesis and doing nothing else. And so it's been quite refreshing and nice to face new challenges like learning how to use Excel and learning how to make charts and present data in nice ways and so on. And that's kind of using a different part of my brain. And so it's really kind of helped me open up some different, or develop some different skills. So I think in the interests of time, I think we're going to have to round up the panel discussion there, but we will, if you have any further questions and so on afterwards, do email us, do get in touch on Twitter. We're now going to hand over to Akash Paul, who is a senior fellow here and is going to talk about how we recruit and what we are looking for.
Thanks, James. So, evening. Nice to see you all. Using the mic. Yeah. Yeah, great to see you all here. I'm sure my colleagues have been doing the sales pitch job on you, persuading you what a great place this is to work and what a great internship program we have, which is all absolutely true. I think what I'll quickly do is just talk you through how we actually go about recruiting interns and what we're looking for, and give you some hopefully useful tips. And then we'll have a bit of time for questions, and also I'll be around afterwards, and so will everybody else, I think, for drinks on the landing, as I'm sure people have mentioned, so can continue the conversation there. So first of all, I'm sure you've already been made aware, we are currently open, of course, for applications. The deadline is a week today, so 10 a.m. on the 26th of June. So yeah, you still have a bit of time to put in an application if you choose to do so. And then following on from that, the other key dates you should be aware of, this information will all also be, most of what I say actually may be already in the very detailed internship information pack, which you'll find on the website if you haven't already seen it. But so yeah, the other key dates to be aware of is that we'll be interviewing candidates between the 10th and 12th of July. We do interviews usually in person, but we can also do them via Skype or by telephone. I think we interviewed Sarah when she was still in Australia.
Sometime late in the evening.
Yeah. So we can be flexible about that. But yeah, those are the dates, 10th to the 12th of July. And then we are looking for people to start in October. So we'd be sort of confirming appointments and so on some point in July, but the start point would be ideally early October. And in terms of what we're looking for, so there's some sort of prerequisites. So obviously availability would have to be available from October for up to 6 months. We'll be making appointments usually for a 6-month placement with a 3-month probation period. So you would have to have that availability. They are full-time positions as well, so they're not the type of internships you can do alongside studying usually. Occasionally we've taken on people on a sort of 80% 4 days a week basis if you're, say, finishing off a dissertation or something and can fit it around, but that's the kind of minimum availability. So yeah, they're not part-time roles. You do have to have the right to work in the UK. We can't, unfortunately, sponsor visas for interns. So there is a slight Brexit question hanging over people with EU passports. Not entirely sure what might happen, obviously, on that front, but we'll assume that that will be resolved. Maybe that's very foolish and naive, but yeah, we would require people who can work here. And then in terms of academic eligibility, we look for a minimum 2:1 degree. So obviously if you've graduated on a UK system, that's GPA of 3.2 if anyone's done their undergrad in the US. And to go back to the question that was asked a few minutes ago, we don't mind what subject that's in whatsoever. So yeah, and we do, and we welcome people from a variety of backgrounds. So yeah, that's the key thing is just the overall grade. So if you can tick all those sort of yes/no questions and decide to apply, well then we get into the actual process. So I'm not sure how many of you have looked already. Some of you might have already started applications possibly. Others might be not aware of how we do it. So it's explained in here, of course, as I say, but we use an online system. It's through a separate website called, has this all been covered already? No, okay, so the link is obviously there on our website to an external website called Applied. It's a sort of dedicated recruitment portal platform that actually quite a lot of think tanks and government departments use, so you may come across it with other jobs or you may have already done so. It's quite a nice tool, I think, both for applicants and also from our side. And what it facilitates is, well, the process is designed to be run in as fair and unbiased way as possible. So it's all done name blind, for example, and designed to be easy for applicants. So the stages of the process. First of all, there is a multiple choice test. There are 20 questions. You have half an hour to complete them. You can only do it once. Obviously, by that point of doing the test, you'll have registered with your name and email address and contact details prior to that. So obviously, don't click start until you're ready to go. You've got a good place, good internet connection, have a calculator and some scrap paper to hand as well, because the test does include some numerical reasoning questions, quite a few in fact. I think it's 8 out of 20 are maths-based. There's also some verbal and logical reasoning questions and some questions where you're presented with a chart and asked some questions about what logical conclusions you could draw from that. Yeah, and then the verbal reasoning ones are things like selecting the best word to complete a sentence given the context or the argument being made. It's those kind of questions that you may have come across in other similar sort of graduate recruitment tests. We don't have any practice questions available for you to try, I'm afraid. I think that's something we'll try and do in the future. But I think the main thing, I mean, I've given you a sense of the kind of questions. Those of you maybe who haven't done much maths recently, I think the main thing I'd advise is just brush up on your sort of, I suppose it's sort of GCSE level maths stuff really, but percentages and probability, a bit of geometry and actions and things like that. But under the time pressure, it's useful to familiarise with the basic techniques. So that's the first part. And then we use that basically as a filter for who gets through to the next stage. And well, the pass mark is usually around 15 out of 20. I can tell you that. Depends exactly on the distribution. But the next stage of it then is 4 short answer questions that we ask you to complete, and everybody would complete that as well as doing the test. You do that all in one go basically before you get told, before the sort of filter is applied. So first of all, there's just a simple question about your education, and I've talked a bit about that. Second question about your experience. These are, of course, positions for sort of, early career roles, so we don't expect lots of professional experience. We are interested in relevant volunteering or NGO, volunteering with NGOs or university societies or other relevant things you've done that potentially illustrate how you might have picked up some relevant skills, ideally. But those are not the key things. Then the 2 key questions that really determine who gets shortlisted and who gets invited in for interview. First of all, there's a question about your motivation. Why do you want to work with us? What is it particularly about the institute that interests you, attracts you? Where do we potentially, or where does an internship with us potentially fit into your career plans? We don't expect a kind of very precise idea of exactly where you're going to be necessarily, but some sense of where you're going and how we might form a part of that, I think, is helpful. So that's the first question, and then there's a question about your suitability. So why do you think you'd be a good fit for the role? And here, of course, take a look at the job spec, which you'll find. I mean, what we emphasise and what I would say now is we're looking for people with strong analytical, organisational, and communication skills. So these are research positions, yes, so absolutely the analytical side is important, but they're not academic posts. I mean, James talked a bit about the transition from doing a PhD to doing some excellent charts, I must say, over the last few weeks. So the analytical side is important, but yeah, there's an organisational element. You might be helping to organise events or just drive a project forward. You'll be part of a team. You're not sitting in the library just doing research, obviously. So that side of it is important, and then communication. There's a lot of communication within teams, within project teams, but then more generally among researchers. We do presentations of our work. So that side of the role is important too. And then, I mean, those. Did I say that already? Yeah. So they're short answers, 250 words. So it's hard to get all of that in, I know, but take a bit of time to really think through the key points you want to get across to tick off, some of those things I just indicated. And sounds obvious. Check the spelling, check the grammar, check the punctuation, check it again, check it again. I think literally every time I've run the process, there's at least one applicant who's obviously done a bit of a quick copy and paste job and has accidentally talked about why they'd love to work at the Institute for Fiscal Studies or the Institute for Economic Affairs or the Civil Service, and you can imagine what happens to those applications. So pay attention to detail. So that's the written application, the online application process. If you're then invited in for interview, obviously I can't tell you exactly what you'll be asked and so on, but in terms of the format, you'll be informed probably about a week or so before interview usually, or certainly a few days, and you'll be asked to prepare something to discuss at interview, and obviously we'll give you the sort of specific task at that point. It's not like a presentation or anything, but it's just a chance for you to think through something and come and have a sort of informed conversation with us. And preparation for that is definitely a key part of being successful. So make sure you set aside time to do that. And then there are some sort of standard kind of interview questions, sort of a few competency questions that ask you to talk about, examples from your past experience of when you've displayed certain skills and competencies, and possibly some sort of thematic questions about some aspect of government. You might also be asked to interpret another chart or some data, big on charts and data, but it won't be any kind of complex mathematical sort of questions or anything like that. It'll just be that you can read a chart and deduce some interesting things from it. So yeah, that's the process, and the overall general advice I'd give generally, but particularly when you get to interview stage, read up, of course, on what we do, what are sort of active areas of work now. Think about what particularly interests you, what you could add. As I said, prepare well for that task. If you can, practice some competency questions. There's lots of examples of those online. Think through your past experience and sort of examples of what you've done that give a good account of yourself and the way you work. Think about what questions you'd like to ask us at the end of the interview. So I think that's all for me. Good luck to any of you who apply here or anywhere else, and got time for a few questions now, as mentioned.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Akash.
Hello again. Do you have a disability access scheme? Also, you're saying about questions and all that. Is there can you request reasonable adjustments to be made as well?
Yeah, if you contact us before starting the application, then and explain your circumstances, then yeah, we can make reasonable adjustments in terms of the time allocated for the test, and also obviously if you were to come in for interview and that side of it as well. We don't have a specific scheme.
No. I'm just sort of in terms of pre-employment law and disability law. Well, DD and the Equality Act and public duty quality along those lines. I mean, even prior to employment, there's certain duties. I'm just inquiring, but many thanks, Brill.
Okay. I mean, you might so.
It's not even with a disability.
Sure. No, I absolutely understand. I mean, if you want to talk about it afterwards, I'd be very happy to. And Pauline, who's our HR director, is standing here.
In our application, would you expect us, for example, to identify the kind of team or project we'd like to work on more specifically, or would you like us to talk generally about how we fit into the institute?
I wouldn't say there's one correct way to do it. I mean, when it comes to allocation of interns who we appoint to projects, we try to match people where possible with their interests and relevant skills and any experience as well. But we are really looking for people with a general interest in what we do and in government, who we could imagine slotting in where there is a need, in terms of the projects that are active at that point and need some extra resource. So, sure, yeah. I mean, if there are particular areas you're keen on, and have a sort of a desire to explain why and why you think you'd be a good fit for that, then sure, that's not going to count against you. But equally, if there's a range of different areas that you'd be equally interested in, that's fine as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. This is just a question about the application. Can you log out and log back in again during the week?
Yeah, you can, yeah. I mean, obviously the test is 30 minutes, timer starts ticking. But the rest of it, sure, yeah. That's behind you.
Hi, you mentioned, or a couple of you have mentioned that interns have been hired afterwards for longer term positions. Is that a regular thing, or is it just like really great interns that managed to get
I mean,
full-time positions afterwards.
Sure. I mean, there's no automatic progression. The intern scheme is separate, and then usually every year, sometimes more than once a year, we will be recruiting for researchers, but there's no kind of fixed schedule to that. And then those are always open competitions, and interns are obviously welcome and often encouraged to apply. And yes, in practice, having worked here as an intern for 3 or 6 months is quite useful experience if you're applying to become a researcher, because as I'm sure the guys have been telling you, you are effectively a junior researcher as an intern anyway, so it's very good preparation for that. And yes, I mean, if you come to the drinks afterwards, there'll probably be, I don't know how many of them will come, but I think there's probably half a dozen members of the research team who, Sarah's one, who started as interns. So yeah, but there's definitely no guarantee or kind of automatic progression, but in practice it happens quite often. And the other thing I'd say is, I think we always do try to help interns with other, their next step, whether it's here or somewhere else. And we've got lots of people who have experience in government, for example, or experience of other research organisations and so on. And we really do try to help ensure that people go on from here to succeed somewhere else. And we have a fantastic network actually of alumni who are doing lots of great things across Westminster, Whitehall, wider policy world, academia, all over the place.
I think we've got time for one final question.
There's a gentleman here.
Hi there. I wonder if you can share with us some numbers in terms of how many applicants per round get through to, let's say, the shortlist, and how many shortlisters get through to the actual internship.
Yeah, okay, I don't see why not. So we do get a lot of applications, often in the region of 250 to 300, sometimes more than 300. And, well, we are this time we will be looking to appoint at least 3 people from that. So that gives you a sense of the ratio. And we would, so in terms of shortlist, we'd be probably interviewing about 9 people. We normally do a sort of 3-to-1 ratio. The numbers might vary a bit. We'll be having conversations about exactly the resource needs. But it's that kind of scale, yeah.
Akash, do you want to say something about the sifting?
Yeah,
stage?
please.
Plethora of microphones. So what happens is we will go through all the applications that come in. There'll be a cut-off point in relation to the test, the time test that Akash mentioned. And then everybody above that cut-off point will be seen, their answers will be seen by at least 3 people here. So the applications are chopped up. We can't associate, for example, your academic record with your answers to any other question or your work experience. So each person who reviews applications will be handed, or they do it online, they get a number of suitability questions, motivation questions, academic and work experience to look at, but they can't match them up. So they will mark them individually, and then the 3 marks from the 3 different markers will be combined to give an average. And at that point, we then start looking at the top, maybe 50, I suppose, we start looking at that point, and then work our way down to the final interviewees.
And yeah, I mean, from your perspective, actually, I suppose it's worth it's useful to give that overview. One specific thing it means for you is, as you're answering the different questions, because the same person won't see all of them. This is mentioned in here anyway, but I might as well emphasise it. Don't do things like as discussed above, or refer as mentioned in my previous question, because the person seeing it won't have access to that to answer each question as a separate chunk. And the logic of that, by the way, is to go back to what I was saying about the format of the assessment process. It's to eliminate any bias, so every bit of it is assessed on its own merits as an answer to that question. So that's why it runs that way.
Brilliant. Well, I think there are drinks waiting for us outside. So if you do have any further questions, please do follow up with any one of us who will be out there. Just a couple of points before we close. There is, on your chair, there was a form for signing up to our newsletter. We would love to stay in touch with you, so please do fill that out. You can also find that on the website. And also in your confirmation email, you should have received a diversity form. We'd really appreciate it if you could fill that out so that we know who we're reaching with these events. Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you to our brilliant panel members.